Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Cryptic Corpse. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Samuel Whitaker, but folks just call me Sam. Been that way since I got back from Korea in '53. Some days I still wake up hearing gunfire, seeing the faces of my buddies who never made it home. Those memories don't fade, they just sink, deeper, like whiskey into dry soil. I've been running moonshine through these Ozark hills for nearly 8 years now. Not the life I planned, but it pays better than the factory and keeps me moving, keeps the memories at bay most days. It was early October 1961 when I found the valley. I was scouting new locations, somewhere the revenuers wouldn't think to. Look, the forest was thick that day, mist hanging between the trees like old ghosts. I nearly missed the gap in the ridge, just a narrow split in the rock that you'd walk right past if you weren't paying attention. I squeezed through, scraping my shoulders on both sides, and then, there it was, the perfect hidden valley, like something out of a storybook, maybe 2 miles across, ringed by steep hills on all sides. The morning sun lit it up golden, with a creek running clear through the center. But what stopped me cold were the buildings, a whole town, just sitting. There in the middle of nowhere, 12 structures in all, arranged around a small square. Not ruins, mind you. Perfect buildings, like someone had been maintaining them yesterday. I approached slow, hand resting on the pistol in my belt. The town was dead silent. No birds, no insects, just the sound of my boots on dirt. The buildings looked wrong somehow, too perfect. A church with a white steeple, a general store, homes with porches and rocking chairs. Not a spot of peeling paint, not a broken window, no weather damage at all. "Hello?" I called out. Nothing but my echo came back. The town square had a stone monument in the center. I brushed away some leaves and read the inscription. "In memory of the 847 souls who vanished during the harvest moon, September 1863. 847 people, just gone." My skin prickled despite the warm day. I spent that first day exploring. Each building was the same, perfectly preserved inside and out, furniture in place, dishes on tables, like everyone had just stepped out for a minute. The strangest part? No dust, not a speck. The church court. My eye? Solid stone foundation, thick wooden doors. Perfect place for a still remote, defensible, with the creek nearby for water. When I went inside, I noticed something odd. Every surface, pews, altar, walls, had symbols carved into them, crosses, stars, strange writing, like whoever built this place was trying to keep something out. The basement was cool and dry, perfect. I'd bring my equipment tomorrow. That night I camped by the creek. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the valley. As I drifted off, I could have sworn I heard metal objects in my pack shifting slightly, all by themselves. I returned the next day with my copper, still, and supplies. Setting up in the church basement took most of the day. The first batch should have been simple: corn mash, sugar, yeast, nothing fancy. But when I returned the next morning to check it, the liquid had turned blood red. Clear as day, but red as a fresh wound. I dipped a finger in and tasted it, like copper pennies. I dumped it out and started again. That afternoon, I walked the perimeter of the town and found something behind the church. A field that didn't look right, too flat, too even. I poked at the ground with a stick and hit something hard just below the surface. Digging down, I found bone. Human bone. I kept digging, and there were more, hundreds, thousands. It was a mass grave, but not like any I'd seen in Korea. These bones weren't just piled in, they were arranged, laid out in perfect geometric patterns, circles, stars, strange symbols. 847 skeletons, I was betting. In a rotted box near the edge, I found a journal. The leather cover was cracked and stained, but the pages inside were still readable. It belonged to a Confederate deserter named Thomas Wilkes, who'd hidden in this valley during the war. I read it by firelight that night. Most was the usual wartime account: battles, hunger, fear. But the last entries made my blood run cold. October 1st, 1863. Strange things happening in town. Folks talking about seeing their dead relatives walking at night, finding bones arranged on their doorsteps. Pastor says it's the devil's work. October 3rd, 1863. Something in the woods, watching us. People gone missing. Sheriff found skeletons walking upright in the forest. No one believes him until we all saw them tonight. October 4th, 1863. It came during the harvest moon. I watched from the hills as it took them all. The night bones walked. God forgive me for not helping. God forgive me for watching. It builds itself from their remains. It learns from them. It becomes them. I alone survived to tell this tale. May God have mercy on anyone who finds this place. That should have been enough to send me running. Any sane man would have packed up and never looked back. But I've never been accused of being entirely sane. And besides, the valley was perfect. No law, no nosy neighbors, just me and my still. I tried not to think about the journal as I finished setting up my operation. But strange things kept happening. My compass wouldn't work. The needle just spun in circles. Metal tools would shift position when I wasn't looking. Even the still components would move slightly, adjusting themselves as if invisible hands were fine-tuning them. On my fourth day, I brought my horse and dog into the valley. Big mistake. My horse Bess refused to cross into the town proper. She reared up, eyes rolling white with terror, and nearly threw me. When I finally got her calm, she wouldn't budge an inch closer. My dog Rex was worse. The moment we approached the church, he tucked his tail between his legs, whimpered like I'd never heard before, and ran. Took me hours to find him, hiding in a hollow log at the edge of the valley. I left them both tied up safely away from town and walked back alone. The valley was silent as ever, but it felt different now, like it was watching me, like the buildings themselves had eyes. That night I slept in the church, my shotgun across my lap. Around midnight I woke to a sound I'll never forget. A rhythmic scraping, like someone dragging something heavy across stone. It was coming from behind the church, from the mass grave. I grabbed my lantern and shotgun and crept outside. The harvest moon hung huge and orange in the sky, painting everything in sickly light. The scraping sound grew louder as I approached the field. What I saw there stopped my heart for a full beat. The bones were moving, shifting, rearranging themselves into new patterns under the dirt. The ground rippled like water as femurs, skulls, and rib cages sorted themselves into different positions. I stood frozen, watching the dance of the dead, until the movement finally stopped just before dawn. I should have left then. I know that now, but something about this place had its hooks in me already. I told myself it was just the perfect hiding spot, the perfect operation. But looking back, I think something was already calling to me, something ancient and patient, something that had been waiting a very, very long time for someone like me to find this valley. I didn't sleep much after that first night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those bones moving under the dirt. But I stayed. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was something else pulling at me. The next morning, I went back to check the mass grave. In the daylight, things always seemed less scary, more normal. But what I found sent ice through my veins. The bones had definitely moved. They now formed a perfect spiral pattern, like a giant whirlpool made of human remains. I hadn't imagined it. Standing there in the cool morning air, I felt watched from every direction. I kept busy with my moonshine operation, trying not to think about what was happening around me. The second batch turned out clear this time, not blood red like before. Small blessing, I guess. On the third day, I woke up at dawn and stepped outside the church to smoke. There, in the middle of the town square, was something that hadn't been there the night before. A human skeleton, fresh and clean, like it had been scrubbed, but it wasn't just dumped there. The bones were arranged to spell out words, "Welcome, Samuel." My real name, not Sam, Samuel. The name only my mother used. I dropped my cigarette and backed away. My hands shook as I packed some supplies. I needed to get out just for a day, clear my head, figure things out. As I hiked toward the gap in the rocks, I felt the valley watching me go, like it knew I'd be back. I spent that day in the nearest town, drinking too much and trying to forget what I'd seen. I even thought about asking the local sheriff about the valley, but what would I say? There's a ghost town where bones move at night? Instead, I bought more supplies and headed back. The smart thing would have been to stay away, but that valley had a hold on me already, and my still was set up. Good copper isn't cheap. When I returned, I went straight to the church and pulled out the Confederate Deserter's Journal again. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. The final pages were worse than I remembered. It calls itself the Bone Collector, not with words, but I hear it in my head. It has been here since before people. It feeds on death. It becomes what it takes. I watched from the hills as it came into town that night. At first, it looked like a walking skeleton. Then it grew as it walked, adding bones from people it killed, building itself bigger, smarter. It killed them all in one night. 847 souls. I heard their screams for hours. By morning, nothing was left but bones arranged in patterns. I still see when I close my eyes. The collector can look like anyone it's killed. It wore the preacher's face when it spotted me hiding. It smiled with his mouth, but not his eyes. I'm leaving this journal as a warning. This valley is its feeding ground. If you're reading this, run. Run while you still can. I should have listened. I really should have. That night, I noticed the building seemed different. A door that was closed would be open when I turned back. Windows would fog up, like someone was breathing on the glass from inside. I'd hear footsteps, but no one was there. I started carrying my shotgun everywhere. The next morning, I found my dog Rex's skeleton on the church steps, clean and white, arranged like he was sleeping, but that was impossible. Rex had died of old age 3 months ago, back at my cabin 3 states away. I'd buried him myself under his favorite tree. That night, I sat in the church with my shotgun across my knees. Around midnight, I heard a sound outside, scraping, like bone on stone. I cracked the door open and nearly screamed. The skeletons from the mass grave were moving, not just shifting under dirt now, walking, dancing, hundreds of them, moving in perfect circles around the town square. Finger bones clicked against each other like someone playing musical spoons. I slammed the door shut and wedged a pew against it, pulled the curtains closed, tried to calm my breathing. "It's not real," I whispered to myself. "It's not real." But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. The next day, I found my moonshine operation running by itself. The fire was lit, the mash was bubbling, and the coils were dripping clear, perfect liquor into the jars. I hadn't touched a thing. I stood there watching, too scared to move. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, raising my shotgun, and came face to face with myself. No, not exactly myself. A skeleton wearing my old Korean war uniform. The bones were yellowed with age, but the uniform was perfect, down to the sergeant's stripes and the bullet hole in the left sleeve from when I almost got my arm shot off near Pusan. "Private Whitaker," it said in my drill sergeant's voice. "Sergeant Mills, dead since 51. You're out of uniform, soldier." I fired both barrels. The skeleton flew apart, bones clattering against the wall. I didn't wait to see more. I ran, but I only made it to the town square before I stopped dead. All around me, the buildings seemed to lean in, watching, waiting. The skeleton bones I'd just shot were already pulling themselves back together, crawling across the ground to reform. I was trapped. The valley had me now, and it wasn't going to let me go. That night, I barricaded myself in the church again. I reloaded my shotgun and waited. Outside, I could hear bones walking, hundreds of them. The click-clack of skeletal feet on dirt roads. As the moon rose, I heard a knock at the door. "Sam," called a voice I hadn't heard in 10 years. My war buddy, Mike Chen. "Sam, let me in. It's cold out here." Mike had died in my arms in Korea. His blood had soaked my uniform. Another voice joined in, then another. All my dead friends from the war calling my name, asking to be let in. I covered my ears and prayed for morning. When dawn finally came, the voices stopped. I cautiously moved the pew and opened the church. A door. The town square was empty. No bones, no walking skeletons, but there on the steps of the church were all my war medals. The ones I kept in a box under my bed back home, 200 miles away. Something had been in my house. Something had taken my most personal things. And I was starting to realize this wasn't just some ghost story. This was something older. Something that had been feeding on human suffering for a very, very long time. And now it had found me. The medals weren't just tossed on the church steps. They were arranged in a perfect line, from lowest honor to highest. Just the way I'd kept them in my box at home. Someone, something, knew exactly how I organized them. I gathered them up with shaking hands and stuffed them in my pocket. Part of me wanted to throw them away, but I couldn't. They were all I had left of those days. I spent that day checking every building in town again, searching for a way out that didn't involve the main path. There had to be another exit from this valley, but the hills were too steep, the rocks too sharp. I was trapped like a rat. In the general store, I found something that made my blood run cold. The store ledger was open on the counter, showing recent purchases. And there was my signature, clear as day, on entries from 3 weeks ago. But I'd only found this place a week ago. I flipped through more pages. My signature appeared again and again, going back weeks, months. Each one perfect, exactly how I signed my name. Something had been pretending to be me long before I ever set foot in this valley. I slammed the book shut and backed away. The walls of the store seemed to pulse, like they were breathing. I ran outside, heart hammering in my chest. The sun was starting to set. I needed shelter for the night. The church seemed safest, with all those symbols carved into the walls. I hurried back, trying not to look at the buildings that seemed to watch me pass. As I approached the church, I stopped dead in my tracks. There on the altar was a skeleton wearing a blue dress. The same blue dress my wife Margaret was buried in 6 years ago. "Hello, Samuel," it said in her voice. Her sweet voice that I thought I'd never hear again. "I've missed you." I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "Why don't you join us?" she asked, head tilting to one side, bone grinding against bone. "Complete the collection. We're all here, waiting for you." And I backed away slowly, then turned and ran until my lungs burned. I ended up at the edge of town, gasping for breath, tears streaming down my face. That thing wasn't Margaret. My Margaret was gone. This was something else, something using her memory against me. I spent that night in an abandoned house, jumping at every sound. Sleep came in short bursts, filled with nightmares of bones and blood. In the morning, I decided to check the town records. I needed to understand what was happening. The town hall was a small building next to the general store. Inside, I found record books dating back to the town's founding in 1839. Flipping through, I saw the same pattern. My signature appearing in town meetings from 1960, 1959, 1958, all the way back to 1950. And then I found something worse, a photo from 1951, a town gathering. And there I was, standing in the back row. My face, my body, but not me. I was in Korea in 1951. It hit me then. This thing, this bone collector, it wasn't just mimicking me now. It had been me for years. It had worn my face, used my name. Maybe it had even lived part of my life. How much of what I remembered was really me? How much was this thing? That night I saw them. The skeletons of Civil War soldiers reenacting their final battle in the town square. Blue coats against grey, silent except for the click of bone against bone. They moved with terrible purpose, falling and rising again in an endless loop of death. I watched from a window, unable to look away. The battle ended the same way each time, all soldiers falling, then the bones pulling themselves together into a giant walking figure that stalked the battlefield, collecting remains. The bone collector. As dawn approached, the soldiers' remains returned to the mass grave, but the large figure remained, watching the church where I hid, waiting. The next day I found a modern skeleton sitting on my porch. It wore dog tags. My dog tags, but that was impossible. I was wearing my dog tags right now. I reached for my neck to check and found nothing. With trembling fingers, I took the tags from the skeleton. They had my name, my blood type, my service number. But the date of death listed was 1951. 1951, when I was in Korea. Memories flooded back. The ambush in the forest. The Chinese soldiers, appearing from nowhere. The bullet that hit me square in the chest. But I survived that, didn't I? I staggered back to the church, my mind reeling. In the basement I found a small mirror I'd been using to shave. I looked at my reflection, my face, my eyes, me. But was it? Had it ever been? That night the bone collector came to me in the church, not as a skeleton this time, as me, perfect in every detail. "You've been dead for 13 years, Samuel," it said with my voice. "I've been living your life, wearing your skin, using your memories." "No," I whispered, "that's not possible." "You died in Korea," it continued, "shot through the heart by a Chinese sniper. I found your body 3 days later, half eaten by animals. Such wonderful trauma in your bones, such delicious memories." It smiled with my face. "I've been you ever since. The honorable discharge, the job at the factory, the moonshine business, all me." "Margaret," I choked out. "Did she know?" "Your wife never suspected a thing," it said. "She died believing I was her beloved Sam, home safe from the war." I lunged at it with my knife, but it moved too fast. My blade passed through. Empty air. "I brought you here because it was time," it said from behind me. "Time to show you what you've become. What we've become." The walls of the church began to bleed. Red liquid seeped from between the stones, dripping onto the floor. The smell of copper filled the air. "This town," it said, "is my feeding ground, has been for centuries. The Civil War was a feast, Korea even better. So many bones, so many memories." It showed me then, showed me my own death in the Korean forest. The bullet tearing through my chest, the cold seeping into my limbs as I bled out on foreign soil. My final thoughts of home, of Margaret. And then it showed me what came after, how it found my body, how it absorbed my memories, my personality, how it became me so completely that even I couldn't tell the difference. "Every person you've met since Korea has been me," it said. "Every conversation, every touch. All me wearing different faces. The blood from the walls was ankle deep now, warm, alive. Your moonshine operation isn't for alcohol," it explained. "It's for preservation, for keeping the bones fresh, for extracting the memories they contain." I looked around wildly. The church interior was changing, revealing its true nature. The walls weren't stone anymore, but packed earth, like the inside of a grave. The pews were made of bones, thousands of them fused together. "This town isn't preserved," I whispered, understanding finally dawning. "It isn't real at all." "Now you see," it nodded. "This valley exists in a bubble of time, a place between places, where I can process what I collect." It gestured, and the floor opened beneath me. I fell into darkness, landing hard on packed earth. When my eyes adjusted, I saw I was in a vast underground chamber, and all around me were bones, millions of them, arranged in perfect patterns that hurt my eyes to look at. And there, in a place of honor, was a skeleton I recognized. My skeleton, my bones cleaned and arranged just so. "You've been my primary host for 13 years, the bone collector said, appearing beside me. "The longest I've ever worn one. Your vase, you should be honored." It split then, dividing like a cell. 2 of me, then 4, then 8, all with my face, all with my voice, all with my memories. "I can be many places at once," it explained. "Many people. I've been doing this since before humans had names for themselves." One of my doubles stepped forward. "Did you really think the Korean War just happened? That it was about politics, or land, or ideology?" Another laughed. "All wars are my harvest. I whisper in the right ears, plant the right seeds, and then I feast on the results." "No," I said, backing away. "That's not possible." "I've had many names," it continued. "Bone collector, soul eater, death walker, but always the same purpose. To feed, to grow, to become." It showed me its plans then, how it had used my identity to infiltrate military command, how it was positioning itself to start a new conflict, a bigger harvest than Korea, than any war before. "And you helped me," it said. "Your memories, your skills, your understanding of human weakness, all so useful." I had to stop it, had to find a way. But what could I do against something so ancient, so powerful? The answer came from deep in my mind, something I'd seen in the church, something carved into the foundation stones. The carvings in the church foundation, ancient symbols that looked older than the building itself. I'd noticed them, but hadn't understood their importance until now. "You're lying," I said, finding my courage somewhere deep inside. "If you're so powerful, why hide in this valley? Why need this feeding ground at all?" The bone collector's many faces flickered with something that might have been concern. "You need this place," I continued, the realization growing stronger. "You're tied to it somehow." I remembered the journal, how the Confederate deserter had watched from the hills, how he'd survived when everyone else died. "You can't leave the valley," I said. "Not completely. That's why you need people like me, hosts to carry your consciousness outside." The chamber shook slightly. Bones rattled against each other. I'd struck a nerve. "Enough talk," it said, and all my doubles stepped toward me at once. "It's time to complete the collection." I ran through tunnels of bone, upstairs made of skulls, finally emerging in the church basement where my still was set up. The moonshine operation I'd thought was mine. Looking at it now, I understood its true purpose. The copper coils weren't for distilling alcohol. They were for extracting memories from bone marrow. The clear liquid dripping into jars wasn't moonshine. It was pure, distilled human experience. And I'd been drinking it, small sips here and there, testing my product. No wonder the bone collector had been able to control me so easily. I'd been consuming its power, but that gave me an idea. I grabbed a jar of the liquid and drank deeply. Pain exploded behind my eyes as memories not my own flooded my mind. The Civil War, ancient tribal conflicts, battles throughout history, and knowledge. The bone collector's knowledge, including its weakness. I staggered outside. The town was transforming around me. Buildings bent and twisted, revealing their true nature. All part of the bone collector, all extensions of its will. The whole valley was one massive organism, feeding on human remains. I needed explosives. had to destroy the mass grave, scatter the bones beyond its ability to reconnect them. In the general store, I found mining supplies, dynamite, blasting caps, left over from when this was really a town, when people actually lived here instead of just memories of people. I worked quickly, setting charges around the mass grave. The bone collector tried to stop me, sending skeleton after skeleton to attack. I fought them off with an axe I found, smashing them apart faster than they could reform. But I knew it was just buying time, wearing me down. When the charges were set, I hit the plunger. The explosion shook the whole valley. Dirt and bones flew into the air, scattering in all directions. For a moment, everything stopped. The skeletons fell apart. The building stopped moving. Then, slowly, the bones began to crawl back together. Pulled by some unseen force, they started reconstructing themselves. Did you really think it would be that easy? The bone collector appeared before me, wearing my face again. I've existed for thousands of years. I've survived worse than you. It was right. Explosives wouldn't stop it. I needed something else, something more powerful, the foundation stones, the symbols. I ran back to the church, the bone collector close behind. In the basement, I tore at the dirt floor until I exposed the foundation. The symbols were there, carved into ancient stone that looked older than humanity itself. Native American symbols. No, older than that. Something that had been here before people ever walked these lands. I recognized them now, with the bone collector's knowledge swimming in my head. A binding ritual, a way to trap it permanently in this valley. "No!" it screamed, lunging at me. But I was already tracing the symbols with my finger, reciting words, in a language I shouldn't know, but somehow did. Each word felt like fire in my mouth. The bone collector grabbed me, trying to stop the ritual. We fought there in the dirt, surrounded by copper coils and jars of memory fluid. Two versions of Sam Whitaker locked in a fight to the death. I was losing. It was stronger, faster, but I had one advantage. I'd been drinking its power. I knew things it didn't expect me to know. With a final surge of strength, I slammed my palm down on the central symbol, completing the ritual with my own blood from a cut on my hand. "By blood and bone, I bind you here," I said in that ancient language. "By memory and marrow, I trap your essence. By the power of all you've consumed, I command you to remain." The valley shook. The church walls cracked. Outside, I could hear buildings collapsing. The bone collector screamed with 1,000 voices, its form shifting rapidly between all the people it had ever been. Men, women, children, soldiers from every war, and always returning to my face. "If you do this," it hissed, "you trap yourself, too. Your consciousness is part of mine now. You'll be imprisoned here forever. Better that than letting you start another war," I said. "Better that than more harvests." The binding ritual was working. I could feel the bone collector's power fading, being forced back into the valley, unable to extend beyond its boundaries. But I was fading too. The part of me that had been absorbed into the collector was being pulled back with it. My very self was dissolving. "We could have been gods," it whispered with my voice. "We could have fed forever." "Some prices are too high," I said, feeling myself unravel, "even for immortality." As the ritual completed, I was faced with a final choice. Complete dissolution, true death at last, or eternal imprisonment with the bone collector in this valley between worlds. In the end, it wasn't really a choice at all. I let go. Let myself dissolve. Better to end completely than exist as part of that thing forever. Better true death than eternal feeding. As my consciousness faded, I had one last thought. A warning. A message to anyone who might find this place someday. Do not disturb the harvest. My name is Catherine Riverside, but everyone calls me Kate. I've spent my whole life in these mountains, following in my dad's footsteps as a forest ranger until I found my own path as a wilderness survival instructor. But nothing, not all my training, not all my experience, could have prepared me for what happened at Crow's Nest Lookout Tower. It was early June when I arrived at the tower, my truck bouncing along the narrow dirt road that ended 40 miles from civilization. The drought had turned everything brown and brittle. One spark could set the whole forest ablaze, which is why I'd been assigned to mandatory fire watch duty for 6 weeks. The tower stood like a lonely sentinel rising above the pines. As I climbed the metal stairs, each step echoed in the quiet forest. Something felt off right away. The door was unlocked, swinging open with a long, sad creak. "Hello, Eddie?" I called out. Eddie Cartwright was supposed to be here for the handover to show me the ropes before heading back to town. No answer. But Eddie's stuff was everywhere. Coffee mug on the table, half-eaten sandwich turning green with mold, clothes tossed over a chair like he'd just stepped out for a minute. His personal photos still hung on the wall, a smiling Eddie with his dog and fishing buddies. I set down my backpack and checked the logbook. Eddie's last entry was from 2 weeks ago, the handwriting getting messy toward the end. "The trees are singing again tonight. Getting louder. Need to report this." A chill ran down my spine despite the summer heat. I switched on the radio for my check-in. "Base, this is Kate Riverside at Crow's Nest Tower. Checking in. Over." Static crackled before a voice broke through. "Kate, thank God. We haven't heard from Crow's Nest in 10 days. Where's Eddie? Over." "He's not here. Looks like he left in a hurry, but his stuff is still here. Over." A long pause. "Kate, Eddie's last transmission was strange. He reported, singing trees. We thought he was getting cabin fever or playing a joke. Should we send someone? Over." "Negative. I'll look around and report back. Save the manpower for actual fires. Over and out." As darkness fell, I tried to settle in. The tower's windows gave a perfect view of the surrounding forest. Moonlight casting silver shadows between the pines. I was making a cup of instant coffee when I heard it. A soft, melodic whistling that seemed to rise from the trees themselves, not wind through branches. This was a tune, rising and falling like someone was playing a flute made of air. I grabbed my flashlight and checked outside. Nothing but trees and darkness. Back inside, I started looking through Eddie's things, hoping to find some clue about where he went. That's when I found it, a journal wedged between the floorboards, like he'd tried to hide it. The first entries were normal, daily logs about weather and wildlife. Then, things changed. Day 14, hearing strange sounds at night, like whistling, but musical. Reported to base, but they think I'm imagining it. Day 17. The whistling is getting louder, hard to sleep. My ears ring all day now. Day 23. I'm losing my hearing in my left ear. The whistling is inside my head now. There are voices in the wind. The last entry sent ice through my veins. It's in the trees. God help me. It's in the trees. I barely slept that night. The whistling came and went, sometimes so faint I thought I imagined it, sometimes so clear it could have been coming from inside the tower. At first light, I went outside to inspect the tower's structure. That's when I saw them, massive scratch marks on the metal support beams, 3 parallel lines deeper than any bear could make. They went all the way up the tower, like something had climbed it. I tried the radio again. "Base, this is Kate at Crow's Nest. I need to report some strange..." The radio crackled and died as the whistling started again, louder than before. Not a coincidence. Walking around the tower's base, I discovered something even stranger. A perfect circle of dead pine trees, their needles turned a sickly silver white. They formed an exact ring around the tower, like a boundary line. I decided to look for Eddie's truck. Maybe he'd left a note there, or some indication of where he'd gone. 2 miles down the mountain, I found it parked at a weird angle, half off the dirt road. The keys were still in the ignition, the driver's door completely torn off its hinges and thrown 20 feet away. As I stood there trying to make sense of it, the whistling started again. I turned slowly, and through the trees, just for a second, I saw a massive shadow move between the pines. Not a bear, not anything I'd ever seen before. It was tall, impossibly tall, and it moved like smoke, there and not there. And all the while, that haunting whistle song filled the air around me like the forest itself was trying to tell me something terrible. I ran back to the tower, my heart pounding, but deep down, I already knew the truth. I wasn't alone up here, and whatever was with me had already taken Eddie. I woke up thinking I heard my dad's voice. "Katie, girl, wake up. Something's not right." My eyes snapped open. The voice had been so clear, so real, but my dad died 3 years ago in these very mountains. I sat up in the small cot, my heart racing, and listened. Just the quiet hum of morning birds and the creak of the tower as the wind pushed against it. "Dad?" I whispered, feeling silly even as I said it. No answer. Of course not. I made myself a cup of instant coffee and tried to think clearly. I hadn't slept well. The whistling had gone on for hours, sometimes loud, sometimes so soft I strained to hear it. No wonder I was hearing things. I flipped through Eddie's journal again. The last page had something I'd missed in the dim light last night. In shaky handwriting. "It's learning my voice." It called to me using my own words. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I glanced at the radio, remembering how it had cut out yesterday. Outside, the morning was crisp and clear. The circle of dead trees looked even creepier in the daylight, their silver-white needles shimmering. As I stared at them, the whistling started again, but different this time. It had a pattern, almost like a song. I turned in a slow circle, watching the trees. The whistling changed when I moved, following me, matching my pace. When I stopped, it slowed. When I walked faster, it sped up. "What do you want?" I called out, immediately regretting it. Talking to nothing made me feel crazy. The whistling stopped completely. Then, after a long pause, it came back, mimicking the exact rhythm of my question. I ran back inside the tower and slammed the door. My hands shook as I reached for the radio. "Base, this is Kate at Crow's Nest. Something strange is happening up here. I need..." Static cut me off, but through it, I heard my own voice. "At Crow's Nest. Everything's fine. Routine day. Over." But I hadn't said that. "Base, did you hear that? Someone's interfering with our transmission." More static. Then the base operator. "Kate, we've been getting your check-ins for the past 3 days. What do you mean interfering?" 3 days. I'd only been here 1 night. I haven't been making check-ins. Whatever you're hearing, it's not me. The radio went dead. Outside, the whistling had turned into a laugh. My laugh. I couldn't sleep that night, or the next. The whistling kept changing, becoming more complex. Sometimes it sounded like my mother's old lullabies. Sometimes like the school bell from my hometown, things only I would recognize. On the 4th day, or was it the 5th, I found the deer. 5 of them, arranged in a perfect circle, just like the dead trees, their bodies intact but completely bloodless. They hadn't been killed by any animal. I was losing track of time. The lack of sleep was making everything fuzzy. I kept hearing my dad's voice calling me from the trees, telling me to come outside, to follow the whistling. That evening I found an old cassette player under Eddie's bed. There were tapes labeled with dates. I played the most recent one. It was Eddie's voice at first, normal, making notes about weather conditions. Then as the tape went on, his voice began to change. Subtle at first, a slight whistling quality when he pronounced certain words. By the end of the tape, his voice had a hollow, wooden sound, like he was speaking through a pipe. The last recording was just whistling, the exact same melody I'd been hearing from the trees. I threw the player across the room. Something smashed against the tower window, making me jump. The glass cracked in a perfect spiral pattern. Outside, the whistling grew louder, more insistent. The windows vibrated with each note. Another crack formed, then another. "Stop it!" I screamed. The whistling became a roar, a physical wall of sound that slammed into the tower. I was thrown against the far wall like I'd been hit by a truck. My head cracked against the metal beam, and stars exploded behind my eyes. As I slid to the floor, the last thing I heard was my dad's voice, crystal and clear. "Katie girl, it knows your name now, it knows your voice." Then darkness took me. I don't know how long I was out. When I woke up, sunlight was streaming through the cracked windows. My head throbbed where it had hit the wall. Something was wrong with time. The calendar on the wall had X marks through dates I didn't remember living through. Had I been here for 2 weeks already? I found a notebook with my handwriting in it, observations about weather patterns, radio check-ins, normal firewatch stuff, but I had no memory of writing any of it. "What's happening to me?" I whispered, touching the pages. The last entry was from yesterday. "It's getting closer, watches me while I sleep." A movement outside caught my eye. Standing at the edge of the dead pine circle was something. At first I thought it was just a tall, skinny tree. Then it moved. It was shaped like a person, but wrong. At least 12 feet tall, its body covered in what looked like pine needles, thousands of them, silver white like the dead trees. Where its face should be, there was just a dark hollow, opening like the sound hole of a wooden flute. I couldn't scream, I couldn't move. It stood perfectly still, watching the tower, watching me. Then it lifted one long arm and pointed at the circle of dead trees. The circle had grown wider since I first saw it. Healthy green pines on the edge were turning silver before my eyes, their needles shriveling as if something was sucking the life out of them. The creature made no sound as it backed into the forest and disappeared between the trees. My legs gave out and I sank to the floor. This couldn't be real. I was hallucinating from lack of sleep. Had to be. But deep down, I knew it wasn't in my head. Later that day, I forced myself to go outside. I needed to find Eddie. Maybe he was still alive somewhere, hiding in the forest. I followed a trail of broken branches and strange three-toed footprints bigger than my hand. The trail led me to an old pine, taller than the others. I looked up and my heart stopped. Eddie was there, 60 feet up, his body impaled on pine branches like someone had placed him there carefully. His mouth was sewn shut with what looked like pine needles threaded through his lips. His eyes were open, staring down at me. "Oh God, Eddie," I whispered, backing away. "I'm so sorry." A voice came from above, my voice. "Oh God, Eddie, I'm so sorry." But it wasn't me who spoke. The sound came from Eddie's body, his sewn shut mouth not moving. I ran until my lungs burned. Somehow I ended up back at the tower. Inside, the radio crackled to life by itself. "Kate, base here. We've been worried. You missed your last 3 check-ins. Everything okay up there?" "No, nothing is okay. There's something in the forest. It killed Eddie. It's killing the trees. You need to send help." Silence. Then, "Kate, what are you talking about? You've been making regular check-ins. You reported all clear yesterday and the day before." That wasn't me. It's using my voice somehow. The base operator sounded concerned now. "Kate, maybe you should get some rest. Hank is scheduled to bring supplies tomorrow. He can stay with you if you're not feeling well." "No! Tell Hank not to come. It's not safe." But the radio went dead. That thing was luring people here, using my voice. I needed to find out what it was. In a desperate search of the tower, I found old reports from previous watchmen hidden in a locked cabinet. Some dated back to the 1950s. All described the same thing: whistling in the trees, lost time, voices that weren't their own. And then I found the photos. 4 men, their bodies arranged in trees just like Eddie, all previous tower watchmen. The most recent was from 1952. This thing had been here all along. In the oldest report, a watchman named Thompson had written, "Native guide says the tower was built on old burial ground. Says a medicine man was murdered here, his voice stolen while he sang death songs. His spirit lives in the trees now, collecting. Voices like others collect stamps. As I read this, I realized something terrible. I couldn't remember what my own voice sounded like anymore. When I spoke, the words felt strange in my throat, like they were catching on something. I ran to the small bathroom mirror. Opening my mouth wide, I shone my flashlight down my throat and saw them. Tiny silver-white crystals growing on my vocal cords, like pine needles taking root inside me. The creature was feeding on my voice, just like it had fed on Eddie's and all the others before him. I wasn't just trapped in this tower, I was being harvested. That night, I sat huddled in the corner of the tower, hands pressed over my ears. But it didn't help. The whistling found a way in, becoming words, sentences. My own voice played back to me like a broken record. "Daddy, please don't go." The trees whispered in my voice. "The storm's getting worse." My breath caught. Those were my exact words to my father the day he died, heading out to rescue lost hikers in a blizzard. Words I'd never told anyone. "How do you know that?" I screamed out the window. My voice cracked painfully, the crystals in my throat growing. In answer, the creature stepped out from the trees. In the moonlight, its needle-covered body glinted like thousands of tiny knives. It raised one long arm and pointed at me, then at the dead pines. I understood then. It was storing voices in the trees, Eddie's, the other watchmen's, and pieces of mine it had already taken. A twisted library of stolen sounds. At dawn, I searched the tower again, tearing up floorboards, checking behind cabinets. There had to be something here, some clue about how to fight this thing. Under the tower's main support beam, I found a hidden compartment. Inside was a bundle wrapped in deerskin, old and cracked with age. I carefully unwrapped it to find strange items. A stone knife with symbols carved into the blade, feathers tied with human hair, small bones arranged in a pattern, and a leather pouch filled with what smelled like tobacco and herbs. A ritual kit. Someone had tried to fight the creature before. Beneath it was a yellowed piece of paper with shaky handwriting. Tower built on Abenaki burial ground, 1937. Chief warned us. Shaman singing hawk murdered here, 1879. His spirit bound to pines. Cannot leave the circle. Feeds on voices to cross. Over. Cannot leave the circle. The dead pines were a boundary. I stared out at the silver-white trees. If the creature couldn't leave its circle, I should be safe if I ran now. But the circle was growing, and it was using my voice to lure others here. Hank was already on his way with supplies. I had to stop it. The paper mentioned fire as a weakness. Worth a try. I gathered every flammable liquid in the tower, lighter fluid, alcohol, cooking oil, and poured it around the edge of the dead pine circle. With shaking hands, I lit a match and threw it. The flames caught immediately, racing around the circle. But instead of normal orange fire, these flames burned silver-white, cold as ice. They didn't destroy the dead pines. They fed them. The trees seemed to drink in the fire, growing taller, stronger. The whistling turned into laughter, my laughter, Eddie's laughter, the laughter of all those it had taken. A horrible chorus that made me cover my ears in pain. The creature appeared at the edge of the circle, its hollow mouth hole aimed at me. A blast of sound hit me like a physical wall, throwing me back against the tower. When I tried to run, I slammed into nothing, an invisible barrier of sound. Waves that pushed me back toward the tower. I was trapped. Back inside, I fumbled through the ritual items, desperate for anything that might help. The notes mentioned silence as a defense. The creature fed on sound, on voices. If I stayed completely quiet, maybe it couldn't find me. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to make no sound at all. The whistling outside grew frantic, searching. Then, slowly, it faded. Relief washed over me until I noticed the silence. Not just the whistling, but everything was silent. No birds, no wind in the trees, no creak of the tower's metal. A complete, suffocating absence of sound. Something moved in the corner of the room. Not the pine creature. Something else. A shadow, darker than darkness, with no shape but somehow still there. Where the pine creature fed on voices, this new thing seemed to drink in the silence itself. Two monsters, one that took your voice, another that took your hearing. And I'd attracted the second one by trying to hide from the first. The shadow. Creature drifted closer. My ears began to hurt, a pressure building inside them like I was deep underwater. I could feel my eardrums stretching, ready to burst. In panic, I began to whistle, copying the tune I'd heard the pine creature use. The shadow immediately retreated, but as I whistled, I felt the crystals in my throat grow. Each note I made fed the pine creature, giving it more of my voice, more of myself. I had to choose, surrender my voice to one monster or my hearing to the other. Outside, the pine creature began whistling again, but differently now. A harmony to my melody, creating a duet between us. Each note seemed to pull something from deep inside me, like hooks in my soul. I realized with horror that I was enjoying it, this connection, this song between us. Part of me wanted to go outside, to join the dead pines, to let my voice become part of its collection forever. That's how it had taken all the others. Not by force, but by seduction. A perfect song. That never ends. I had to escape. Now, before I lost any more of myself. I packed a small bag, water, Eddie's knife, the ritual items, and ran from the tower. The mountain trail stretched before me. My only way back to civilization. If I could just make it down, find help. I didn't get far. 300 yards down the trail, the air thickened like invisible walls closing in. The whistling surrounded me, pushing against my body from all sides. No matter which way I turned, sound barriers forced me back toward the tower. Exhausted and defeated, I returned to my prison. The circle of dead pines had grown again, now stretching almost to the tower itself. Soon there would be no safe ground left. Night fell. The pine creature stood just outside the tower, watching me through. The windows with its hollow face. The shadow creature hovered near the ceiling, waiting for silence. I was caught. Between them, my voice and hearing both under attack. In desperation, I tried something new. Taking a deep breath, I began to whistle back at the pine creature, not copying its song, but creating my own. A counter melody. Something strange happened. The pine creature tilted its head, listening. Then it changed its tune to match mine. I changed again. It followed like we were having a conversation. With each exchange, I felt power building in my throat. The crystals there weren't just taking my voice. They were changing it, making it more like the creatures. I could feel sound waves forming around me, pushing against the walls. A terrible thought occurred to me. I could use this power, but each time I did, the crystals grew. I would become more like it, less like myself. A small price to pay for survival. I concentrated, shaping the whistling into a focused beam of sound. A crack appeared in the window, then another. I was doing what the creature did, using sound as a weapon. Outside, the pine creature backed away, almost nervously. I had surprised it. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. All night, I practiced, learning to control the sound waves. Each time, the pain in my throat grew worse. By morning, when I tried to speak, all that came out was whistling. I checked the mirror. The crystals had spread, covering my vocal cords completely. My eyes had a silvery tint now. I was changing, becoming something not entirely human. But I was running out of time. Through the tower windows, I could see a dust cloud on the far mountain road. Hank coming with supplies, coming to his death. The pine creature saw it too. It began a new song, using my voice perfectly now. Hank! Up here, I need help. My voice, but not my words. It was now or never. I climbed to the top of the tower, to the highest platform. The creature watched from below, curious. Taking a deep breath, I began the most complex whistle song yet, weaving together all the melodies I'd learned. The air vibrated around me. Windows shattered. Metal groaned. The creature responded with its own song, our melodies intertwining, building on each other. That's when I changed the tune, deliberately creating discord, a clashing note that cut through its melody like a knife. The creature's song faltered. I pushed harder, focusing all my energy into a counter rhythm that fought against its pattern, a feedback loop. The creature shrieked, a horrible sound like trees being torn apart. It clutched at its hollow face hole. The dead pines began to tremble, their silver needles falling like rain. I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The feedback loop grew stronger, a battle of sound that made the air itself crack with pressure. The creature fell to its knees, still shrieking. The circle of dead pines began to splinter, bark peeling away in strips. Inside each broken trunk, I could see faces. Eddie, the other watchman, frozen in silent screams. With one final push, I sent a wall of sound crashing into the creature. Its body shattered like glass, exploding into thousands of silver pine needles that scattered across the ground. The sound wave continued outward, breaking every window for miles. In the sudden silence that followed, I heard a distant rumble. As the shock wave hit the mountains, triggering small avalanches, it was over. I collapsed, my throat burning like I'd swallowed fire. When I tried to call out, to make any sound at all, nothing happened, not even a whisper. The feedback loop had destroyed my vocal cords completely. I was mute, a bitter victory. As I made my way down the mountain, the forest seemed different, quieter. The trees that had been turning silver were brown and dead now, their needles fallen. The whole forest felt sick, infected by whatever the creature had been. At the ranger station, they found me collapsed on the porch. I couldn't speak, couldn't explain what had happened. They showed me reports of a small earthquake centered exactly at Crow's Nest Tower. Seismographs had recorded it as a series of sound waves, unlike any natural quake. I wrote my story down, but no one believed me. They blamed carbon monoxide, poisoning from a faulty heater in the tower, said it explained the hallucinations, the lost time, even my damaged vocal cords from screaming while unconscious. They never found Eddie's body, or the others. A week later, I was in the station when the radio crackled to life. A voice came through, my voice exactly as it used to sound. "Base, this is Kate at Crow's Nest. Everything's fine up here, just checking in. Over." The rangers looked at me in confusion. I was sitting right there, mute. "Kate? You're not at the tower. Who is this? Over." A pause. Then laughter, my laughter, but wrong somehow, hollow and wooden. "Eddie says hello," my voice said through the radio. "Everyone says hello. The trees are singing again tonight." That's when I knew. The creature wasn't gone. Part of it had survived. In the radio equipment, in the recorded sounds of my voice, it was still using me to lure others to the tower. But the worst realization came that night, as I lay in bed at the ranger cabin. I felt strange, disconnected from my body. Looking down at my hands, I could see through them just slightly, like they weren't quite solid. I ran to the mirror. For a second, just a second, I saw not my face, but the hollow face hole of the creature looking back at me. The truth hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't destroyed the creature at all. I had become it, and my body, my real body, was still at the tower, hanging 60 feet up in a pine tree, mouth sewn shut with silver needles, eyes open and staring. I'd been dead for weeks. My name is Diana Lancaster, but everyone calls me DI. I'm a seismologist, which is just a fancy way of saying I study earthquakes for a living. Right now, I'm setting up my research station on Mount Desolation in the Cascade Mountains of Washington. It's a lonely spot, miles from the nearest town. But that's exactly what I need to study, the strange earthquake patterns happening here. Something weird is going on with this mountain. The tremors I'm recording don't match any normal geological patterns. They come in precise sequences, almost like mathematics, like someone or something is creating them on purpose. When I hired, Joseph Crow Feather as my guide to help me bring my equipment up the mountain. He got really nervous. He stopped at a certain point and refused to go any further. "These are the Screaming Mountains," he told me, his face dead serious. "My people don't come here. The mountain has a voice, and when it speaks, death follows." I thanked him for his help and continued alone. I'm a scientist. I deal in facts, not legends. But then came my first night on the mountain. I was almost asleep in my tent when I heard it. A sound that made my blood freeze. A horrible human-like scream coming from inside the mountain itself. I scrambled to check my equipment, thinking I must be imagining things. But there it was, recorded right on my seismic monitors, sound waves that shouldn't exist, vibrations that looked more like a voice than an earthquake. The next morning, I hiked around the base of the mountain and found something that made my skin crawl, ancient petroglyphs carved directly into volcanic rock. They showed a mountain with a face and symbols warning of the voice that splits stone. How could ancient people have carved into this impossibly hard rock, and what exactly were they trying to warn about? My seismic readings showed something else impossible. Massive, hollow chambers inside the mountain, caverns so large they shouldn't be able to exist without the mountain collapsing in on itself. On my third day, I found equipment scattered across the peak. High-tech stuff, expensive. It belonged to the previous research team, the one led by Dr. Martinez that was supposed to be here 6 months ago. The university said they'd packed up and left early, but their equipment was still here. Just no bodies. During a particularly strong tremor, I noticed the hot springs near my camp turned blood red, and when I measured the temperature, it was well above boiling point. Water doesn't stay liquid at that temperature. It's physically impossible. In a small cave, protected from the elements, I found a waterproof case with Dr. Martinez's research notes inside. The last entry made my hands shake as I read it. The seismic activity is intelligent. It responds to our presence. God help us. The mountain is alive. I laughed it off as the ramblings of a scientist too long in isolation. Until that evening, when a major tremor shook the mountain so hard I was thrown to the ground. As I looked up at the mountainside, I saw it. Just for a split second, as the rocks shifted, a massive face, a humanoid silhouette formed by the moving. Rocks themselves staring right at me. Then it was gone, leaving me to wonder if my eyes were playing tricks on me or if Dr. Martinez was right all along. The mountain is alive, and I think it knows I'm here. It's been a week since I saw that face in the mountain. I've been analyzing my data non-stop, and what I found chills me to the bone. The earthquake patterns aren't random. They're a form of communication. When I run the seismic waves through my audio equipment, they sound like a deep rumbling voice. The mountain is talking. Yesterday, I felt a small tremor while making my morning coffee. Out of curiosity, I checked my heart rate on my fitness watch. The tremor's rhythm perfectly matched my heartbeat. When I got scared and my heart sped up, the tremors came faster. When I took deep breaths to calm down, they slowed too. It's responding to me. This morning I hiked to a new spot to place sensors. I found a small landslide that had uncovered something awful. Evidence that the previous team didn't just leave. There were precise piles of rocks, too perfectly arranged to be natural, each one placed exactly where it would cause the most harm to a human body. I didn't find the bodies, but the dried blood told me enough. The steam vents on the eastern slope have started making sounds that are almost like words, not English, something much older. I recorded them and played them back at half speed. It sounds like speech, rasping, horrible speech. I've been going through old newspaper articles and geological surveys on my laptop. Every major earthquake in this region for the past century has had its epicenter directly under a town or city. That can't be coincidence. Something has been targeting places where people live. Dr. Martinez's notes mentioned a lava tube on the north face. I found it today. Inside was something that will haunt my nightmares forever, Martinez himself, perfectly preserved in a casing of volcanic glass. His face was frozen in a scream, eyes wide with terror. The glass was still warm to the touch. The paths I've been using to move around the mountain keep changing. The trail I marked yesterday to my second sensor station was completely gone this morning, replaced by a sheer cliff. I'm not losing my mind. The mountain is reshaping itself. I've figured out what it's doing. Each earthquake it causes creates more stress in the surrounding rock, which seems to make it stronger. It's feeding on the destruction it creates, growing more powerful with each tremor. Most terrifying of all, I found a cave yesterday filled with pieces of modern equipment partially melted into the rock walls. Not just from Martinez's team. There were devices decades old, each one more advanced than the last. The creature hasn't been killing research teams out of anger. It's been studying us, learning about our technology, getting smarter. Last night, I felt the strongest quake yet. I ran outside my tent and froze in place. A stream of lava was flowing down the mountainside, but instead of following the path of least resistance, it was forming a shape, a massive, humanoid figure 30 feet tall, made entirely of molten rock. It turned what looked like a head toward me, and I swear I could feel it watching me. Then it spoke, not with sound, but with a tremor that shook my entire body, vibrating my bones, until I thought they would shatter. "I see you, Diana," it said through the earth itself. "You hear me. The others never listened." I ran back to my tent and didn't sleep all night. How does it know my name? What does it want from me? And most importantly, how am I going to get off this mountain alive? The creature revealed itself. Fully today. I was checking the data on my main computer when the ground started shaking. Not like a normal earthquake. This was controlled, deliberate. I ran outside and watched in horror as an entire section of the mountainside liquefied into lava, flowing and reshaping until it formed a massive human-like figure as tall as a 5-story building. "You are different from the others," its voice rumbled through the ground beneath my feet. "You understand the language of the earth." I was too terrified to speak. The heat from its molten body was so intense I had to back away. "I am not just this mountain," it continued. "I am all mountains. I am the spine of the earth." That's when I realized the truth. This thing isn't just in Mount Desolation. It's connected to the entire Cascade Range, maybe even beyond. All those volcanoes, all those fault lines, they're all parts of its body. In my tent, I dug through old geological surveys with shaking hands. The Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980 wasn't natural. The pattern of the explosion exactly matches the mathematical sequence I've been recording in these tremors. This thing caused that disaster. It fed on all that destruction and death. The real horror sank in as I connected the dots. The creature has been studying human science through each research team it lures here. It's learning how our technology works, how we monitor and predict earthquakes. And it's planning something massive. A sequence of earthquakes along the entire ring of fire. Millions would die. Last night I tried to sleep, but couldn't. Every time my heart beat, the ground beneath me pulsed in perfect sync. It was timing tiny tremors to match my heartbeat, letting me know it was watching, always watching. This morning, I found a hidden cave that wasn't there yesterday. Inside was a gallery of horrors, perfect statues made of volcanic glass. Each one was a person, captured in a moment of terror. I recognized Dr. Martinez and members of his team. There were dozens more, going back what looked like decades. Some wore old-fashioned clothes, like they were from another time. That's when I realized another impossible truth. The creature can somehow move through layers of geological time. The past and present exist together for it. No wonder it seems to know so much. As I was leaving the cave, I heard its voice again, this time coming from the walls themselves. "I chose you, Diana. Your research is the key. You have mapped the points of pressure. You know where to push to make the earth scream." A chill ran down my spine as I understood what it meant. My research on earthquake prediction and patterns in the wrong hands. It could be used to trigger earthquakes instead of predicting them. This thing had been watching my career, waiting for me to develop the very science it needed. "Join me," it said, the cave walls glowing red with heat. "Let me preserve you in glass, perfect forever. Give me your knowledge, and I will spare what you love." "The big one," I whispered, understanding its plan. "You want to trigger the Cascadia subduction zone, an earthquake that would devastate the entire Pacific Northwest." The walls pulsed with light, almost like a nod. "Why?" I asked, finding my voice at last. "Why do this?" "Because it is time," it answered. "The cycle must continue. The land must be reborn." I ran from the cave, my mind racing. I need to escape this mountain, to warn someone, but I have a terrible feeling the creature has no intention of letting me leave alive. I've tried to escape 3 times now. Each time the mountain itself stops me. Paths that should lead down suddenly end in cliffs that weren't there before. Rock slides block trails moments after I step onto them. Once, the ground split open right in front of me, a crack 6 feet wide suddenly appearing where solid rock had been seconds earlier. The creature doesn't want me to leave. "There is nowhere to go!" Its voice vibrates through my equipment when I'm checking readings. The sound is so powerful, it nearly blows out my eardrums. "I am the mountain. I am all mountains." I'm starting to understand what that means. This thing isn't just living inside the mountain, it is the mountain. Its consciousness spreads through the magma chambers beneath the surface, connecting to other volcanoes, other mountains. How do you escape something that big? Last night, I found a box of old maps in my desperate search for another way down. They showed settlement patterns going back hundreds of years. Every major city in the region sits directly on a fault line, or near a volcano. That can't be a coincidence. This thing has been guiding where humans build their homes, placing us exactly where we'd be most vulnerable. When I confronted it about this, it didn't deny anything. "San Francisco, 1906, it grumbled. "Alaska, 1964. I have shaped your history. I have culled your herd." It spoke so casually about disasters that killed thousands. To this thing, we're just ants to be crushed when we become too numerous. But there's something bigger happening. Through my readings, I've pieced together its true plan. It's not just about causing random destruction. The tremors form a pattern that could trigger earthquakes at specific points around the Pacific. The Ring of Fire. If all those fault lines rupture in sequence, it would restart Earth's entire geological cycle. A reset button for the planet. Today, I found something that gives me a tiny bit of hope. Dr. Martinez's final audio recording, hidden inside a sealed container. "It influences through fear," his voice said, weak and strained. "When your fear peaks, its control is strongest. I've found that meditation, controlling my own heart rate and breathing, weakens its hold. The Native Americans knew this. Find their ritual site. It holds the key." Following this clue, I searched the lower slopes and found it. An ancient circle of stones, each carved with symbols. This was where Joseph Crow Feather refused to go further. His people had found a way to bind the creature centuries ago, keeping it dormant until modern mining and drilling woke it up. Just as I was examining the stone circle, trying to understand how it worked, the ground beneath me heaved. The entire mountain seemed to roar in rage. A massive crack split the peak above me, sending tons of rock tumbling down. I ran, but the ground opened beneath my feet. I fell, screaming, down into darkness. When I came to, I was deeper inside, the mountain than any human has likely ever been. In a massive chamber that shouldn't be possible, the walls glowed red with heat from flowing magma. But somehow the air was breathable. I wasn't dead. The creature had saved me from being crushed. It wanted me alive. As I stood up on shaking legs, I realized where I was. I had fallen directly into the heart of the mountain, into the magma chamber itself, and I wasn't alone. The walls of the chamber pulsed like a giant heart. The floor shifted beneath my feet, forming a path forward. The creature was inviting me deeper. With no way back up and nowhere else to go, I followed the path, moving toward the center of the mountain and whatever waited for me there. The path led me to the center of the magma chamber, a vast open space where the air shimmered with heat. And there it was, the creature's true form. It wasn't a mountain spirit or a demon like I'd imagined. It was something much stranger, much older. A living thing made of molten rock and crystal, pulsing within a light. Parts of it were solid like ancient stone, while others flowed like lava. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. "You see me now?" it said, its voice gentler than before. "You see what I truly am." The creature towered above me, but something about it seemed weak, diminished. Cracks ran through its crystalline body, leaking light from within. "You're dying," I said, the realization hitting me suddenly. "Yes." The word rumbled through the chamber. "The balance is broken. Humans drill, they mine, they fracture the earth. My connection to the core weakens. Soon I will fade." That's when I understood. The earthquakes, the threatened destruction, they weren't just malice, they were desperation. This ancient being was trying to restore what it saw as the natural order. "The earth needs to breathe," it said. "The pressure must be released. The cycle must continue." I thought of the millions who would die if this thing triggered its earthquake sequence, but I also thought about how tectonically unstable this region had become. The pressure was building. Maybe it was right. A series of smaller releases might prevent a catastrophic one. "There is another way," I said, thinking quickly. "My research, we could create controlled releases, small tremors at key points. It would ease the pressure without massive destruction." The creature's light pulsed brighter. "You would help me?" "I would help the people who would die otherwise," I answered honestly. I felt my heartbeat change, becoming stronger, more pronounced. And I noticed something incredible. The creature's pulsing light synchronized with it. My heart was affecting its body. Dr. Martinez's recording came back to me. "When your fear peaks, its control is strongest." But the opposite was also true. When I was calm, when my heartbeat was steady, I could influence it. I focused, steadying my breathing, calming my racing heart. The creature's light dimmed, its form becoming more solid, less chaotic. "What are you doing?" it rumbled, its voice tinged with confusion. I didn't answer. Instead, I thought about the seismic equipment I'd been using, how vibrations can cancel each other out through destructive interference. If my heartbeat could affect this being, maybe I could create a pattern that would disrupt its control. I began to tap out a counter rhythm against my leg, focusing on creating a beat that would clash with the creature's pulse. The effect was immediate. The creature's form began to flicker, its light sputtering. "Stop!" it roared, the chamber shaking violently. "You will destroy us both!" The mountain began to shake apart around us. Rocks fell from the ceiling. Magma began to rise around the edges of the chamber. "If I die, the mountain dies," it warned. "The pressure will have no release. The destruction will be beyond anything you can imagine." I stopped my tapping, realizing it was right. Killing this being wouldn't solve anything. It would make things worse. The entire Cascade Range could become unstable. "There is only one way," the creature said, its form stabilizing slightly. "Someone must channel the pressure. Someone must become the new guardian." I understood then what it was asking. "You want to possess me?" "Not possess, join. I have existed for millions of years. I've watched mountains rise and fall, but I need a guide who understands the human world. Together we could protect both." The chamber rocked with another violent tremor. Time was running out. "If I refuse," I asked, "then we both die here, and the mountains will scream without control." I thought of all the people in Seattle, Portland, Vancouver, all the cities along the coast. I thought of the ancient power of this being. how it had maintained a balance for millennia until human activity disrupted it. "I'll do it," I said finally, "but we do it my way. No intentional casualties. We find another way to release the pressure." The creature's light pulsed in what felt like agreement. It moved toward me, its molten form stretching out. When it touched me, there was no pain, only warmth spreading through my body. I felt my consciousness expanding, reaching deep into the earth, feeling every tremor, every shift of rock for hundreds of miles. The mountain began to erupt around us, but we controlled it now. We channeled the explosion upward, away from nearby towns. The creature's scream joined with my own, a sound so powerful it shattered windows 100 miles away. But the destruction was contained, the pressure released in a way that would prevent greater catastrophe. My name is Frank Kellerman, but everyone calls me Moose. Been that way since I was a teenager. Big shoulders and a stubborn streak will earn you a nickname like that. For 18 years, I made my living as a commercial fisherman until the big companies started pushing us little guys out. Now I guide rich folks through the boundary waters of Minnesota, showing them places so pristine and untouched that sometimes I feel guilty for bringing anyone there at all. That's how I met Harold Prescott. Fancy suit, fancy watch, fancy fishing gear that had never seen a drop of water. He ran some big company in Chicago and talked about stress relief and getting away from it all while checking his portable. Radio for stock updates every hour, but he paid triple my usual rate for an exclusive trip to a remote lake system I'd discovered a few years back, one that wasn't on any official maps. "I want the biggest fish in Minnesota, Frank," he told me as we loaded the canoes, "something no one else has ever caught." I should have known right then something was off. The way he said it, like he knew something I didn't. The journey in took 2 days of hard paddling and portaging through thick forest. Harold complained about the mosquitoes and the lack of bathroom facilities, but he kept going with a determination I rarely saw in city folks. When we finally reached the main lake, I knew immediately something was wrong. Fish, hundreds of them, all dead and floating belly up in perfect circles across the water's surface. "What happened here?" Harold asked, but he didn't sound surprised. More like excited. "Never seen anything like it," I said, poking one with my paddle. "Could be some kind of toxic algae bloom, but that wouldn't explain these perfect circles." We made camp on the eastern shore, and I decided to ask around at the small Ojibwe settlement a few miles down. Maybe they'd know what was happening. The elder there, a man named Joseph with deep lines in his weathered face, listened to my description and then refused the money I offered to guide us out. "There are things that swim in deep places," he told me, his eyes never meeting mine. "Things that should be left alone. Take your rich man and go back the way you came." I should have listened. God, I should have listened. That night, the temperature dropped like a stone. Middle of July, and I woke up to find ice forming at the lake's edge in strange geometric patterns, perfect hexagons and triangles that looked almost man-made. Our thermometer showed a 20-degree drop overnight. That just doesn't happen naturally. Harold didn't seem concerned. In fact, he seemed eager to get out on the water. As we paddled across the main lake, the water was so clear I could see straight. And to the bottom, at least 100 feet down in some places, that's when I saw them. Structures like buildings made of some translucent material rising from the lake bed. I blinked and looked again, but they were still there. "Harold," I said slowly, "there's something down there." He leaned over the side of the canoe and smiled, not the reaction I expected. "Fascinating," was all he said. Things got stranger when we started fishing. Harold's expensive reel began, spinning backward, the line extending into the water even though he wasn't releasing it. When he finally got a lure in, it moved against the current, swimming like it was alive. I've been on water my whole life, and I've never seen equipment malfunction like that. By midday, I discovered something else unusual. a strong current flowing in a direction that made no sense. Following it to the northern edge of the lake, I found a massive underwater opening where water was flowing upward against gravity into a higher elevation pool. That's not how water works. That's not how anything works. After sunset, while Harold slept, I took the sonar equipment out alone. Needed to make sense of what was happening. The readings showed massive objects moving, about 200 feet down, larger than any fish that should exist in freshwater. As I watched the screen, stunned, I heard it, singing, coming from beneath the water, not animal sounds, but melodic voices calling up from the depths. I shined my flashlight down and saw more than fish at the bottom, scattered across the lake. Bed was expensive fishing gear, the kind Harold brought. Reels, rods, tackle boxes from different eras. Some looked decades old, others almost new, but no signs of the people who'd owned them. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something was very wrong with this place. And I was starting to think Harold Prescott knew exactly what we'd find here. I woke up to the sound of water slapping against our boat, not normal waves. This was different, more like something hitting it from underneath. I grabbed my flashlight and leaned over the edge. That's when I saw it, a thing like a water tentacle, clear but somehow solid, touching the bottom of our boat. It wasn't random. It was feeling the boat, exploring it. When my light hit it, the thing pulled back fast and disappeared into the dark water. I didn't sleep again that night. Morning came, and Harold was already up, getting his fishing gear ready. His eyes had a weird shine to them, and his hands shook with excitement. "We need to leave," I told him. "Something's not right about this lake." "Nonsense," he said, not even looking at me. "I came to catch the big one, and I won't leave until I do." The way he said it gave me chills. It wasn't just stubbornness, it was like he was under a spell. We went out in the boat again, and Harold insisted we go to the deepest part of the lake. The water there was so clear you could see down forever, but at the same time, so dark it hurt your eyes to look too long. That's when the water around us started to glow, soft blue light in patterns like writing, moving under the surface. Not random. This was communication. Something down there was talking. "Beautiful," Harold whispered. He dipped his hand in the glowing water, and I swear it moved up his arm like it was alive. Then we heard the voice. "Harold, help me. I'm down here." It sounded exactly like a man calling for help, but it came from underwater. No bubbles, no splashing, just a perfect voice rising from the depths. "That's James," Harold said. "My business partner. He came here last year." My blood went cold. "What do you mean he came here? You told me nobody knew about this place." Harold just smiled that weird smile. "I need to find him," he said. And before I could stop him, he dropped his fishing line into the water. But it wasn't bait on the end. It was a drop of his own blood from where he'd cut his finger. The water. Around the droplets swirled and glowed brighter. I grabbed the oars to row us back to shore, but they wouldn't move. It was like they were stuck in cement, but the water still looked normal. We were trapped. That afternoon, the weather changed in seconds. 1 minute, clear skies, the next a storm right on top of us, but only over our boat. 30 feet away, the water was calm and the sky clear. The rain hit like needles, and fog rolled in so thick I couldn't see the shore. "They're showing us what they can do," Harold said, his voice excited like a kid at Christmas. "Isn't it wonderful?" That night, while Harold slept, I took the small diving mask we had and slipped into the water near shore. I had to know what was down there. The water was ice cold but crystal clear. About 50 feet down I found it, a cave in the rock wall, glowing from inside. I dove deeper, my lungs burning. Inside the cave was a man frozen in ice, but not normal ice. This was moving, flowing around him, while somehow keeping him in place. His eyes were open and aware, alive. I recognized him from a photo Harold had shown me. James Peterson, Harold's business partner who'd supposedly died in a boating accident. Last year, when I got back to camp, soaking wet and shaking, Harold was waiting for me. "You saw him, didn't you?" he asked. "You saw James." "What's happening here?" I demanded. "What are those things?" "They've been here for centuries," he said. "They choose people who can help them. Special people. James was special. I'm special." He leaned closer. "And they think you're special too, Frank." That's when I noticed something behind Harold's ears, small slits in the skin, opening and closing slightly, like gills. "They want more of us," Harold said, his skin now shimmering with a faint scale-like pattern in the firelight. "And you're going to help bring them." I backed away, grabbing my knife. "I'm not bringing anyone to this place." "Oh, but you will," Harold said. "They're very persuasive. They showed me things, Frank. Cities under the water. People who never get old, never get sick. They offered me everything." "They're monsters," I said. Harold laughed. "No, Frank, they're the future, and they've been watching you for months. Why do you think I chose you as my guide?" I ran into the woods that night, trying to find a way out, but every path I took somehow led back to the lake. Like the forest itself was working against me, and all night long I heard them singing from the water, calling my name in perfect voices that sounded just like people I've known, just like people I've loved. When morning came, I tried to leave again, packed my gear and headed for the trail we'd used to get here. But after 2 hours of walking, I ended up right back at the lake. Tried another direction. Same thing happened. It was like the lake had some kind of hold on me, pulling me back no matter which way I ran. When I got back to camp, Harold was in the water up to his waist. His skin had a grayish tint now, and those gill-like slits behind his ears were bigger. "They won't let you leave, Frank," he said. "Not until you understand what they're offering." "How long have you been working with them?" I asked, keeping my distance. "Working with them?" Harold laughed. "I've been one of them for years. The Chicago Fishing Club I told you about? It's all of us, people they've chosen. We find more suitable people and bring them here." My mind raced back to all the fishing magazines I'd read with Harold's picture in them. Awards for record catches, interviews about conservation. It had all been a front. "Those people down there," I said, "the ones in the ice, what happens to them?" Harold's smile turned cruel. "They feed us, not their bodies. We're not that simple. We feed on their minds, their memories, their fears, everything that makes them human." I felt sick. "And the Great Lakes? Is that where you're going next?" Harold's eyes widened slightly. "You understand more than I thought. Yes, the lakes are connected underground. We've been slowly spreading for decades. Politicians, business leaders, military men. We've replaced so many already." I remembered news stories about strange behavior from public figures, decisions that made no sense. It all clicked into terrible place. "You won't get away with it," I said. "We already have," Harold replied. "How long do you think you've been here, Frank?" 3 days, I said automatically. He shook his head. "It's been 3 weeks. They've been feeding on your sense of time. Check your beard." My hand went to my face. What should have been stubble was now a thick beard. Somehow I'd lost weeks without noticing. That night, I tried to remember how I'd gotten here. The canoe trip in with Harold. But the memories felt wrong somehow. Slippery, like they'd been changed. Had I really guided Harold here, or had I been brought here just like all the others? I must have fallen asleep because suddenly I was underwater, not drowning, breathing water as easily as air. I was moving through the depths, past those strange buildings I'd seen from the surface. They were cities, underwater cities filled with people, but not normal people. They had human faces on bodies that weren't right. Some had tentacles instead of legs. Others had transparent skin showing organs that pulsed with blue light. And all of them watched me as I swam past. At the center of the city was a massive structure like a temple. Inside, rows of human bodies floated in that strange flowing ice. Their eyes all open, all aware, all silently screaming. I woke up gasping, water pouring from my mouth. A dream, I thought, just a dream, but my clothes were soaking wet, and there was sand from the lake bottom in my pockets. The next morning I found Harold by the shore. His transformation was speeding up. Webbing had formed between his fingers, and his eyes had a filmy covering like fish eyes. "I need to show you something," he said. He led me to a part of the lake we hadn't explored yet. The water there moved in a whirlpool, but instead of going down, it spun upward, defying gravity. "This connects to every major waterway in North America," he said proudly. "They can travel anywhere there's water, rivers, lakes, oceans, even water pipes in cities." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because soon you'll be helping us," he said, "just like me." That's when I noticed my reflection in the water. Behind my ears, small slits had formed. Tiny, but definitely there. I was changing too. I ran my fingers over them, feeling sick. "What have you done to me?" "Nothing you didn't want deep down," Harold said. "Everyone who comes here has a secret wish to escape their life, to become something else." I knew he was partly right. My failing business, my empty house since Maria left. Maybe part of me did want to disappear. "I can still help you fight it," Harold said, his voice almost kind. "It's easier if you don't resist. The more you fight, the more they'll take from your mind." To prove his point, he asked me simple questions I couldn't answer. My mother's birthday, my first dog's name. They were stealing my memories, piece by piece. "How many times have you tried to escape, Frank?" Harold asked with a smile. "Once," I said. "Last night." 12 times, he corrected. "They just make you forget each attempt." That night, I found marks on my legs, scars from cuts and scrapes I didn't remember getting. Evidence of escape attempts wiped from my mind. I was running out of time, and I was starting to forget who I was. The changes in my body got worse each day. I woke up one morning and found myself in the shallows of the lake, half underwater. I didn't remember going there. Scarier still, I was breathing just fine with my face in the water. It felt more natural than breathing air. I pulled myself up onto the shore, coughing and spitting. Water came out, but my lungs didn't burn like they should after drowning. They felt better with water in them. My hand shook as I touched the slits behind my ears. They were bigger now, opening and closing with each breath. When I checked my stomach, I found patches of skin that looked almost like scales, smooth and shimmery in the sunlight. "It's happening faster for you than most," Harold said, appearing beside me. I hadn't heard him approach. His voice had a wet, gurgling quality now, and his eyes were huge and round, barely blinking. "How do I stop it?" I begged. "Why would you want to?" he asked, genuinely confused. "We live forever, Frank. No pain, no age, no death." He lifted his shirt, and I almost threw up. His chest had split open down the middle, forming what looked like a second mouth lined with tiny teeth. Inside, something moved. "What is that?" I whispered. "My children," Harold said proudly. "They grow inside us, then find new hosts. It's how we reproduce." I backed away. "You're pregnant with those things?" "They're not things," he snapped. "They're the future, your future too." He grabbed my arm, his webbed fingers cold and strong. "Let me show you something." He dragged me to a part of the lake I hadn't seen before. The water there was deeper, darker. Harold dove in, pulling me with him. I tried to hold my breath, but after a minute, instinct took over, and I breathed in water. And I didn't die. We swam down, impossibly deep. The pressure should have crushed us, but my body adjusted, somehow. We came to an underwater cave that opened into a large chamber. Inside were eggs, hundreds of them pulsing with blue light. But they weren't fish eggs. Inside each one, I could see a tiny human-like shape, slowly changing into something else. Some had extra limbs growing, others had no legs at all, just long tails. Born from us, but not like us, Harold explained. Each generation gets stronger, smarter. In 30 years, they'll be ready. Ready for what? I asked, my voice strange in the water. To take over, he said simply. Every coastal city will flood first. Then we move inland through rivers and lakes. Humans won't stand a chance. He showed me more, a huge underwater room filled with what looked like maps and plans, detailed drawings of major cities with flood routes marked, lists of world leaders with some names crossed out and replaced. We've been replacing important humans for decades, Harold said. Presidents, generals, scientists, the Cold War. We created that. Kept humans busy fighting each other while we prepared. I felt sick, but not from the water, from the truth. As we swam back to the surface, I noticed the water getting colder in patches. Strange, since it was summer. That's when I realized something. The colder the water got, the clearer my head felt. The transformation slowed down. Back on shore, I pretended to accept everything Harold showed me, but my mind was working, searching for a way out. I remembered something Joseph, the Ojibwe elder, had told me about spirits freezing in the ice. Maybe these creatures couldn't survive extreme cold. That night I experimented. I filled our drinking pot with lake water and set it in the coldest part of our camp where ice had formed. Then I put my hand in it. It hurt, bad. But the scales that had started forming on my palm retreated slightly. The cold was fighting the transformation. Harold caught me doing this. That won't save you, he said. It just delays the inevitable. But I saw fear in his eyes, real fear. The next day, Harold took me deeper into the lake than ever before. We swam down to what looked like a massive machine built into the lake bed. It glowed with blue light and pulsed like a heart. This keeps the water at the perfect temperature for us, Harold explained. It taps into heat from deep in the earth. Without it, these northern lakes would be too cold for us most of the year. I memorized everything about that machine, how it looked, where it was, the pipes running from it. That night, I felt a terrible pain in my mind, memories being pulled, away like teeth. I couldn't remember my mother's face anymore, or the name of the town where I grew up. They were feeding on me, taking pieces of who I was. Worse, I was starting to hear their thoughts, whispers in my head about a grand awakening coming soon. Thousands of them, all across the world, waiting for a signal to rise up at once. I knew I had to act fast. Harold was almost completely changed now. He barely looked human, and I wasn't far behind. Each morning, I found new changes in my body. My fingers were webbing, my teeth were getting sharper, I was running out of time, and I was their next monster in training. I waited until Harold was sleeping. His chest mouth made wet, sucking sounds as he breathed. I grabbed my diving knife and slipped into the water. The cold hit me hard, but I welcomed it. Cold meant clarity. Cold meant I was still me. I swam down to the heat machine, moving faster in the water than I ever could before. My new gills worked without me even thinking about it. Part of me was terrified at how natural it felt. Another part knew this might be my only advantage. The machine was bigger up close. Pipes thick as tree trunks ran from it into the rock below. Blue light pulsed along them like a heartbeat. I could feel warmth coming from it, fighting against the natural cold of the deep water. I studied it, looking for a weak point. The main pipe that carried heat upward was sealed with some kind of metal wheel, like on submarine doors in movies. I put my hands on it and tried to turn it the wrong way, to close rather than open. It was stuck tight. Then I remembered my knife. I jammed it into the gap where the wheel met the pipe and pushed with all my strength. The wheel gave a little, then a little more. That's when I felt them coming. A vibration in the water. Many bodies swimming toward me. Fast. I turned. The wheel harder, muscles screaming. Finally, it moved, grinding shut with a sound that shook the water around me. The blue light flickered, then went dark. The effect was instant. Cold water from deep underground rushed in through the now open pipe. The temperature plummeted. I could see ice crystals forming in the water around me, beautiful and deadly. Screams filled my head, not through my ears, but directly in my mind. The creatures were in pain. I could feel their fear. I started swimming up, but something grabbed my leg. Harold! His face was barely human now, just eyes and a wide mouth full of needle teeth. "What have you done?" he shrieked, voice bubbling through the water. I kicked him hard, aiming for that split in his chest. Something inside squealed when my foot connected. His grip loosened enough for me to pull free. As I swam up, the water got colder and colder. Ice was forming everywhere, growing like crystal trees from the bottom up, beautiful and terrifying. The creatures swarmed after me, their bodies long and slick like giant eels with human faces. But they were slowing down, movements becoming sluggish in the cold. One grabbed my arm. Its skin was so cold it stuck to mine like a tongue on metal. In winter, I pulled away, leaving a patch of my skin behind. The ice was forming faster now, crawling up from the depths. I could see creatures being frozen in place, their bodies becoming part of the crystal structures. Harold made one last grab for me. "The offspring will remember," he gurgled. "They'll find you." Just then, something burst from his chest mouth. Small creatures like tadpoles with human faces and tiny, sharp teeth. They swarmed toward me, faster than their parent. I swam harder than I've ever swum in my life. The surface seemed miles away. My lungs burned with the effort, but the gills kept working, pulling oxygen from the increasingly icy water. The baby creatures nipped at my legs and back, taking small bites of flesh. Each bite was like fire. I kicked and swatted, but there were too many. Then, suddenly, they stopped, froze in place as the ice reached them. I looked down and saw the entire lake bottom transformed into a solid mass of ice, with creatures caught inside like insects in amber. Their faces frozen in silent screams. I broke the surface just as ice started to form there too. The entire lake was freezing solid in the middle of July. I dragged myself onto shore, bleeding from dozens of small bites. My body felt wrong, caught between human and whatever I had been becoming. The gills behind my ears still flapped uselessly in the air. The webbing between my fingers had stopped growing, but hadn't disappeared. I waited 3 days by that lake, watching the ice grow thicker. No one came up from below. Nothing moved under the surface. On the 4th day, I hiked out. It took me a week to reach the nearest town. The people there barely recognized me as human at first. I was thin, wild-eyed, with strange scars and half-healed wounds. I tried to tell the authorities what happened, about the creatures, about their plans, about Harold and his fishing club in Chicago. No one believed me. They put me in a hospital for a while, talking about trauma and hallucinations. But I know what I saw, what I still am. The gills never fully disappeared. They closed up, but left scars. The webbing receded, but returns whenever my hands stay in water too long. And sometimes, when I sleep, I can still hear them calling me in my mind. I read the newspapers, strange floods in coastal cities, politicians and business leaders making odd decisions. Cold War's getting colder. I see their hand in it all. They're still out there in other lakes, other rivers, waiting. But now I'm waiting too. I've become a park ranger at the boundary waters. I watch the lakes, test the temperatures, listen for singing under the water. I've become the monster that hunts monsters. The cold keeps me human enough to remember why I fight. But the changes they made in me give me the power to do it. When winter comes, I feel them grow quiet under the natural ice. But I know spring will come again, and they'll try to rise. They must never succeed, even if fighting them means I lose. A little more of my humanity each year. My name is Frank Kellerman, but now the locals have a new nickname for me. They call me the Iceman. And as long as I'm breathing, those things in the deep places will never take our world. My name is Rebecca Stoneheart. Though everyone just calls me Becca, I'm 33 years old and an anthropologist who studies old folk traditions in the Appalachian Mountains. 3 months ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life when I decided to visit a place called Raven's Hollow in West Virginia. I came here to document the old mountain customs before they disappeared forever. Modern life is creeping into these hills, cell phones, internet, fast food, and I wanted to record these traditions before they were gone. My university thought it was a great idea. They even gave me a special grant to spend 6 months here. The drive up to Raven's Hollow was strange. The road kept getting narrower until it was barely more than a dirt path. My GPS lost signal about 10 miles back, and I started to wonder if I'd taken a wrong turn. Then suddenly the trees opened up, and there it was, a small valley with about a dozen wooden cabins scattered around. What I saw shocked me. These people, all 47 of them, were living exactly like it was the 1800s. No electricity, no running, or water, no modern tools. The women wore handmade dresses, and the men had rough work clothes that looked homespun. Children ran around in clothes that looked straight out of a history book. "You lost, miss?" A tall man with a long grey beard approached me as I parked my car. The others stopped what they were doing and stared. "I'm Dr. Stoneheart from Mountain State University," I said, showing him my university ID. "I wrote to your community about studying your traditions." The old man nodded slowly. "Ezekiel Crow, we got your letter. Didn't think you'd really come." That first day, they put me up in a small cabin at the edge of their settlement. As I unpacked, I noticed how they watched me, not with curiosity, but with something that felt more like hunger. During my first week, I started going through some old county records I'd brought with me. Something odd jumped out. According to these documents, Raven's Hollow had maintained exactly 47 people for 172 years. Not 46, not 48, always 47. How was that possible? I also noticed something disturbing about the people themselves, despite having different last names. Crow, Blackwood, Thorn, Pike, they all looked strangely similar. Same deep-set eyes, same high cheekbones, same slightly too wide mouths with teeth that seemed just a bit too sharp. On my 8th day, Ezekiel Crow came to my cabin as I was writing in my journal. He stood in the doorway, his tall frame blocking the light. "You should leave before the hunger moon," he said, his voice flat. "The hunger moon?" I asked. 3 weeks from now. The new moon of February. Not safe for outsiders." I laughed it off. "I'm here to document traditions like that. Mr. Crow, I'd love to observe whatever ceremony you have." His face didn't change. "Not a ceremony, Dr. Stoneheart. A feeding." That night I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Under the floorboards of my cabin, I found a leather bag containing a wallet, a camera, and a university ID card. Dr. Martin Weber, Anthropology Department, Ohio University. The ID was dated 3 years ago. Later that week, I noticed a woman wearing a modern watch, completely out of place with their 1800s lifestyle. When I asked about it, she just smiled and said, "A gift from the last visitor." In my exploration of the community, I found a strange root cellar behind one of the houses. Inside were dozens of glass jars filled with preserved meat. The labels were written in a script I couldn't read, but something about those jars made my skin crawl. On my 10th night in Raven's Hollow, I was awakened by singing. I stepped outside into the cold night air and heard it clearly, all 47 voices of the community, chanting together in perfect harmony somewhere deep in the forest. The melody was beautiful but wrong somehow, like a lullaby sung in a minor key. I followed the sound to the edge of the trees but stopped. Something told me that if I went any further, I might never come back. As I stood there shivering, I noticed the calendar I'd brought with me. The new moon, the hunger moon, as Ezekiel called it, was now just 2 weeks away. The next morning, I decided to explore more of Raven's Hollow. The people were working in their gardens or fixing their homes, looking completely normal in the daylight. It made the singing from last night seem like a bad dream. I walked past the main cabins toward a part of the hollow I hadn't seen yet. Behind a thick line of trees, I heard strange noises, like animals in pens. I thought maybe they kept pigs or goats back there. I was so wrong. What I found were cages, human-sized cages. Most were empty, but two of them had people inside. A man and a woman, both thin and dirty, huddled in the corners of their cages. They didn't speak when they saw me. They just stared with empty eyes. I backed, away slowly, heart pounding in my chest. As I turned to run, I bumped right into Ezekiel Crow. "Livestock," he said simply, as if that explained everything. "For the feeding." I pushed past him and ran back to my cabin. I grabbed my phone, but there was no signal. There never had been. My car keys were missing from my bag. I was trapped. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those people in cages. I wondered if Dr. Weber from Ohio had ended up in one of those cages too. The next day, I pretended everything was normal. I smiled and asked questions about their traditions, all while looking for a way to escape. The community members watched me closely now, never letting me wander off alone. A little girl named Sarah started following me around. She seemed sweet, with her braided hair and handmade doll, but something about her eyes wasn't right, like an old person looking out from a child's face. "You're going to be part of our family soon," she told me, while drawing patterns in the dirt with a stick. "During the hunger moon, we all become one." "What do you mean, Sarah?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up at me and smiled with those two sharp teeth. "The Hollow King comes inside us all. We share our thoughts. We hunt together. We feed together." I noticed other strange things too. In one cabin, I saw tools made from what looked like human bones, spoons carved from leg bones, knives with handles made from finger bones. The community had their own language they used when they thought I wasn't listening. I started writing down their words in my journal. They had different terms for parts of the human body, words that sounded like they were talking about food. They called hands finger meat and thighs feast cuts. One afternoon, I found a stack of letters in Ezekiel's cabin when he stepped out. They were drafts of letters to different universities, inviting researchers to come study their unique cultural practices. The letters were almost identical to the one I had received. They weren't looking for someone to document their traditions. They were fishing for their next meal. I also realized something about the children here. They didn't seem to belong to specific parents. They moved from house to house, calling everyone Mama or Papa. When I asked about it, a woman named Martha Blackwood just said, "Blood is shared among us all." The most disturbing thing happened on my 12th day in Raven's Hollow. I was talking to a man named Jedediah Pike, a quiet man who had been friendly to me. We were discussing local plants when suddenly the sun went behind a cloud. In that moment of shadow, Jedediah's face changed. His friendly smile disappeared. His eyes went dark and hungry. His voice dropped to a growl. "We can smell your fear," he said in a voice that didn't sound like his own. "The Hollow King tastes it already." Then the sun came back out, and Jedediah blinked. He continued talking about plants as if nothing had happened. That night, I tried to sneak out to check on the caged people again. I thought maybe I could free them and we could escape together. But when I got to the pens, they were empty. On the ground, I saw fresh blood trails leading to the root cellar. I knew then that I had to get out before the hunger moon came. Whatever was happening in Raven's Hollow, I didn't want to be here when it reached its peak. I had one chance: find my car keys and drive away as fast as possible. But as I crept back toward my cabin, I heard Ezekiel Crow's voice from the shadows. "Too late, Dr. Stoneheart," he whispered. The Hollow King has already tasted your name on our lips. You belong to us now. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I would pretend to be interested in their customs, especially this Hollow King they kept mentioning. Maybe if they thought I wanted to join them, they would let their guard down. I'd like to learn more about your spiritual beliefs. I told Ezekiel over a breakfast of eggs and what he called smoked meat. I didn't touch the meat. Ezekiel's eyes lit up. For the first time, he seemed eager to talk. The Hollow King has been with us for over 300 years, he said. When the first settlers came to these mountains, they found this valley empty, except for a cave deep in the hillside. What was in the cave? I asked, writing in my notebook. Hunger, he said simply. A hunger older than people. The settlers heard it calling to them, promising to keep them safe if they would feed it. I kept writing, trying to look interested instead of terrified. Feed it what? Ezekiel smiled. The weak, the lost, the unwanted. One sacrifice each month, when the moon goes dark. As the day went on, other community members shared more pieces of the story. They seemed proud of their history, like how some towns might brag about a famous battle or a presidential visit. Martha Blackwood showed me a hidden room under her cabin. Inside were shelves of old journals, dating back to the 1700s. Each one documented the monthly feedings and how the community had grown stronger with each sacrifice. The Hollow King needs fresh blood to stay powerful, she explained. But not just any blood, special blood, smart blood, like researchers, I said quietly. She nodded. You understand. People with knowledge make the king stronger. Last year we fed him a doctor. Now none of us get sick anymore. I asked if I could read some of the journals. Martha seemed pleased by my interest and left me alone with them. I flipped through the yellowed pages frantically, looking for anything that might help me escape. What I found was worse than I imagined. The journals explained that the Hollow King wasn't just a spirit they worshipped. It was a real entity that physically possessed the entire community during the new moon. They became a single mind in 47 bodies, hunting together like a pack of wolves. One journal from 1843 described how the Hollow King could control people who ate human flesh prepared in their special way. Another from 1925 explained that the entity had grown strong enough to influence people outside the Hollow, drawing travelers to get lost in these woods. I realized with horror that I hadn't randomly chosen Raven's Hollow for my research. Something had guided me here. Those dreams I'd had for months about Appalachian traditions. They weren't my own thoughts. The oldest journal, barely holding together, revealed the most terrifying truth. The Hollow King wasn't satisfied with just this one community. It wanted to spread. It needed knowledge from the outside world, researchers, doctors, teachers, to learn how to extend its reach beyond these mountains. When Martha returned, I closed the journal and smiled. Fascinating history, I said, but how does the king choose who to influence? Blood calls to blood, she said. Once you've tasted the sacred meat, the king can find you anywhere. A cold realization hit me. The breakfast I'd skipped, the stews I'd only pretended to eat. Had I accidentally consumed something in my first days here? That evening, Ezekiel invited me to a special dinner. Just 10 days until the hunger moon, he said. Time for you to truly understand our ways. At the dinner, the entire community gathered in the largest cabin. They brought out special plates and cups made from what I now recognized as human bone. The children sat quietly, watching me with those old eyes. Ezekiel stood at the head of the table and cut his palm with a bone knife. He let the blood drip into a wooden bowl. The blood is the bond, everyone chanted. The flesh is the door. Each person, even the smallest child, cut their palm and added blood to the bowl. When it came to me, I knew refusing would reveal my plan to escape. With shaking hands, I took the knife and made the smallest cut I could on my finger. adding a drop of blood to the mix. Ezekiel stirred the blood with his finger and then painted a symbol on each person's forehead. When he reached me, the blood felt warm, too warm on my skin. "Now you are marked," he whispered. "The king knows your blood." That night, I had terrible dreams. I saw the cave Ezekiel had mentioned. Inside was something massive and hungry, a shape made of shadows and teeth. It knew my name. It spoke to me in the voices of everyone in Raven's Hollow, all at once. "Rebecca," it said, "we have waited so long for someone like you. Your knowledge of other communities will help us grow." I woke up sweating, the mark on my forehead burning like a brand. I touched it, and my fingers came away clean, but I could still feel it there under my skin. 9 days until the hunger. Moon. I needed to escape, but now I understood I was dealing with something far worse than a cult. Something ancient and patient was waiting in these hills, and somehow it had chosen me long before I ever heard of Raven's Hollow. The days crawled by, each one bringing the hunger moon closer. I spent every minute looking for a way out. I found my car keys hidden in Martha's cabin, but when I snuck out to my car, I discovered the engine parts had been removed. I was truly trapped. 8 days before the hunger moon, something strange began happening to the people of Raven's Hollow. They started moving in perfect unison, turning their heads at the same time, blinking together, even breathing as one. When they spoke, they often said the exact same words at the exact same moment. "The king is waking," they would say, their voices overlapping in a way that made my skin crawl. I tried to keep my fear hidden, still pretending to be interested. In joining them, Ezekiel seemed to believe me. He began showing me things no outsider was meant to see. "Come," he said on the 7th day. "It's time you saw the king's true home." He led me deep into the forest, to a narrow opening in the hillside hidden behind thick bushes. The cave entrance was small. We had to crawl on our hands and knees to enter. The smell hit me immediately like rotting meat and something else I couldn't name. As the tunnel widened, I saw markings on the walls, symbols carved into the stone and painted with what looked like dried blood. The air grew warmer, the deeper we went. "The king has lived here since before people came to these mountains," Ezekiel said, his voice echoing in the darkness. "It waited for the right ones to serve it." The tunnel opened into a large chamber. In the center was something I'll never forget as long as I live. It looked like a massive pile of parts. Human parts that hadn't fully decomposed, all merged. Together in a pulsing mass, I could see faces pressed against the surface, mouths open in silent screams. "The sacred body," Ezekiel said proudly. "What remains of all who have been consumed. They live on as part of the king." I fought the urge to vomit. I could see recent additions to the mass, fresh enough that I recognized the faces of the man and woman I'd seen in the cages. "During the hunger moon, the king's consciousness flows out from here and into all of us," Ezekiel explained. "We become its hands and eyes in the outside world." "And what happens to me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You are special, Rebecca. The king will take your knowledge, but keep your body whole. You will lead us to new feeding grounds." That night, I tore through my cabin looking for anything I could use as a weapon. Under the floorboard where I'd found Dr. Weber's belongings, I discovered a small notebook. It was a journal, and as I flipped through it, I realized Weber had learned everything I had and more. His final entry read, "The entity must return to the cave during daylight. It can only possess the community at night, and only fully during the new moon. It can be destroyed, but only if the host bodies all die while it's inside them. May God forgive me for what I must do." The next morning, 5 days before the hunger moon, I noticed the community had begun hunting for me. Not openly, but they were watching my cabin, tracking my movements. Their coordination was frightening. If one lost sight of me, another would appear. They never spoke to each other, but they always knew where I was. I pretended to sleep that night, but slipped out my window when the moon was at its highest. I needed to find out what Dr. Weber had planned. His journal mentioned explosives. He must have hidden them somewhere. As I crept through the dark hollow, I realized something terrible. The landscape itself seemed different. Paths that should have led to the main road now curved back toward the center of the community. It was as if the hollow itself was changing, trapping me inside. The little girl, Sarah, appeared in front of me so suddenly I nearly screamed. "You can't leave," she said, her voice sounding like many voices speaking together. During the hunger moon, this place exists in both worlds, the real one and the king's world. What happened to Dr. Weber? I asked her. She smiled. He tried to destroy the king. He brought dynamite from the outside world and hid it in the cave, but the king found him before he could use it. And the dynamite? Still there. The king can't touch it. Fire is the only thing it fears. 4 days before the hunger moon, I made my decision. I couldn't escape, at least not by running. I would have to destroy this thing, just as Weber had planned to do. I spent the next days watching the cave entrance, noting when people came and went. I realized Ezekiel was right about one thing. During the day, all 47 community members walked the hollow, but at night, some would disappear into the cave and emerge changed, their movements more fluid, their eyes darker. The entity was practicing, extending its control a little more each night as the new moon approached. 3 days before the hunger moon, I saw my chance. The community gathered for a special meal, leaving the cave unguarded. I slipped away and crawled into the narrow entrance, a flashlight clenched between my teeth. The smell was worse than before. The mass in the center had grown, pulsing with a sickly light. I forced myself to search the edges of the chamber, looking for Weber's explosives. I found them tucked into a crevice, 6 sticks of dynamite wired to a simple timer. Weber had prepared everything, but he'd never gotten the chance to use it. Just as I reached for the dynamite, I heard a noise behind me. The entire community stood at the entrance to the chamber, their faces expressionless, their eyes black in the dim light. "The king sees through all our eyes, Rebecca," they said together, 47 mouths forming the same words. "Did you think we wouldn't notice?" They began moving toward me as one, a wall of bodies with a single purpose. In that moment, I knew what true terror felt like. 2 days until the hunger moon, and I was running out of time. I backed away from the advancing wall of people, my hand still on the dynamite. They moved in perfect sync, like dancers in a nightmare ballet. "The king has waited for someone like you," they said in that horrible unified voice. "Someone who knows where other communities gather, cities, universities, places with fresh minds to consume." My back hit the cave wall. There was nowhere to run. Then I remembered Weber's journal. The entity feared fire. I had a lighter in my pocket that I'd found in the cabin. With shaking hands, I pulled it out and flicked it to life. The flame was tiny, but the effect was immediate. The community members hissed and stepped back as one, their black eyes reflecting the small light. "Stay back," I said, holding the flame toward them, "or I'll burn this whole cave down." They retreated just enough for me to edge along the wall. Toward the tunnel entrance, I grabbed the dynamite bundle as I moved, keeping the lighter flame between me and them. "You cannot stop what's coming," they said. "The hunger moon rises tomorrow night. The king will have full power then." I made it to the tunnel and crawled backward, keeping the flame visible until I was out of the cave. Then I ran, clutching the dynamite to my chest. I didn't stop until I reached my cabin, where I barricaded the door with everything I could move. That night was the longest of my life. I could hear them outside circling my cabin, whispering in that collective voice. They didn't try to break in. They were just waiting for their king to reach full strength. "One more day, Rebecca," they called through the walls. "One more day and you'll be part of us forever." I studied Weber's dynamite setup. The timer was simple. Turn the dial and it would count down from 60 minutes. 6 sticks of dynamite would be enough to collapse the cave, burying the thing inside. But a new horrible thought occurred to me. According to Weber's journal, the entity could only be destroyed if all its host bodies died while it was possessing them. That meant all 47 community members would need to be in the cave when it collapsed. And during the hunger moon, they would be out hunting, not gathered in the cave. I needed a plan, a way to lure them all into the cave during the hunger moon. As dawn broke, I realized there was only one bait they wouldn't be able to resist: me. The final day before the hunger moon, the community left me alone. They didn't circle my cabin anymore. They didn't watch me. They were preparing for their transformation, saving their energy for the hunt. I used the time to prepare myself. I found a sharp kitchen knife and cut a small wound on my arm, letting the blood soak into a strip of cloth. When night fell, I would use it to create a trail leading into the cave. As the sun began to set, I felt a change in the air. It became heavy, like before a storm. The sky darkened, but no stars appeared. The new moon, the hunger moon, was rising unseen in the black sky. From every cabin in the hollow, people emerged, but they weren't people anymore. They moved differently, faster, lower to the ground, more like animals than humans. Their faces had changed too, becoming longer, their mouths wider. And their eyes were solid black, reflecting no light. I waited until they gathered in the center of the hollow. All 47 of them stood in a circle, their heads raised to the invisible moon. Then, as one, they began to change, their bodies twisting, bones cracking as they transformed into something no longer human. This was my chance. While they were distracted by their transformation, I slipped from my cabin and ran to the cave entrance. I dragged the blood-soaked cloth behind me, leaving a clear trail. At the cave entrance, I crawled inside, still trailing the cloth. In the main chamber, I placed the dynamite near the pulsing mass, the physical form of the Hollow King. The thing seemed aware of me. The faces trapped in its surface turned toward me, mouths opening and closing like fish out of water. I set the timer for 60 minutes and started it. 1 hour to lure the transformed community into the cave. 1 hour until this nightmare ended. I crawled back to the entrance and peered out. The transformation was complete. What had once been the people of Raven's Hollow were now twisted, elongated figures that moved on all fours, their 2 wide mouths filled with sharp teeth. They caught my scent immediately. 47 heads turned toward the cave in perfect unison. They could smell my fear, my blood on the cloth. I retreated into the cave as they began to move. Not running. They were too confident for that. They knew I was trapped. They knew I had nowhere to go. I positioned myself near the pulsing mass, the timer of the dynamite showing 47 minutes remaining. I needed to keep them in here when it went off. All of them. The first of the creatures entered the chamber, the one that had been Ezekiel Crow. His transformed body was larger than the others, his teeth longer. "The king welcomes you, Rebecca," he said. But it wasn't just his voice, it was the voice of the mass behind me, of all the half-absorbed victims within it. Soon you will know the joy of being part of something greater. More creatures flowed into the chamber, surrounding me in a circle of twisted bodies and hungry eyes. The timer read 38 minutes. "You've led us right to where we wanted you," I said, trying to sound brave. "In this cave, where the king is vulnerable." The creatures laughed, a horrible sound like breaking glass. "The king is strongest here," they said together. "This is where we become one." The mass behind me pulsed faster, reaching out tendrils toward the transformed community members. As each tendril touched one of the creatures, their bodies stiffened and their eyes glowed brighter. "See how we join," they said, "the many becoming one, and soon you will join us too." The timer read 25 minutes. I needed to keep them here longer. "I want to understand," I said. "Before I join, tell me how the king came to be." They seemed pleased by my question. The creatures settled onto their haunches, still surrounding me but no longer advancing. "The king was here before people," they said, "before animals. It fed on simple life until humans came with their complex minds. It learned that consuming consciousness made it stronger." As they spoke, more tendrils reached out from the mass, connecting with more of the creatures. The timer read 18 minutes. "And what does the king want?" I asked. "Why does it need me?" "To grow," they answered, "to spread beyond this hollow. Your knowledge of anthropology, of how communities form and function, will help us create new feeding grounds." The timer read 12 minutes. Almost all of the creatures were now connected to the central mass by pulsing tendrils. Only a few remained, separate. "I'm ready," I lied. "I want to join now." The remaining creatures moved closer, eager to see my absorption. The timer read 7 minutes. The mass behind me sent out a thick tendril that wrapped around my ankle. It burned like fire, and I felt something pushing into my mind. Alien thoughts, hungry thoughts. "Your body will remain yours," the collective voice said. "But your mind will be ours. You will return to your university. You will bring others here." The timer read 3 minutes. I could feel the entity trying to get into my head, pushing against my thoughts. I fought it with everything I had, focusing on one thought: get them all connected to the mass. "Join with me!" I gasped, falling to my knees. "All of you, join with me now!" The last few creatures moved forward eagerly, reaching out to touch the mass. Tendrils wrapped around them, connecting them to the central entity. The timer read 1 minute. All 47 were now physically connected to the Hollow King. I could feel its triumph as it pushed deeper into my mind. "We win," the collective voice said, "as we always win." I smiled through the pain. Not this time. The timer reached 0. The explosion was deafening in the enclosed space. The cave ceiling cracked, then collapsed, bringing tons of rock down on the mass and the creatures connected to it. I was thrown against the wall by the blast, rocks and dust raining down around me. As the entity died, I heard a scream. Not just one voice, but hundreds, maybe thousands of voices crying out at once. All the consciousness it had absorbed over centuries, released in a final moment of death. I don't remember how I survived, or how I escaped the collapsing cave. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital in Charleston. They told me hikers had found me wandering on a forest road, bloody and babbling about a Hollow King. The authorities searched the area I described, but they found no community, no hollow, no cave. Just empty forest and hills. They decided I must have fallen and hit my head while researching alone, but I know what happened. I feel it every day, because while I destroyed the Hollow King's physical form, a piece of it lives on inside me. In my dreams, I see other isolated communities in these mountains. I know their names, their locations, places where the king had planted seeds of itself, waiting to grow. Sometimes I find myself looking at maps, marking these places. Sometimes I catch myself writing emails to colleagues, suggesting they visit these fascinating cultural sites I've discovered. Each time, I stop myself. I destroy the maps. I delete the emails. But the knowledge is still there, pushing at me, trying to use me to begin the cycle again. I won the battle in Raven's Hollow, but I fear the war is just beginning. And the hunger, the terrible hunger that wasn't there before, grows stronger with each passing day. My name is Rebecca Stoneheart, and I am becoming the thing I destroyed.